and welcome to this episode of Probation Matters, a podcast by the Probation Board for Northern Ireland, which tells the stories of how probation works within the justice system to change people's lives and help create safer communities. I'm Lisa Maginnis, and it is a pleasure to be joined by Clare Osborne, one of our probation managers based in our Hydebank prison team. It's really timely to be talking to you, Clare, during Prison Week, a week to highlight and focus on the work done within the prison environment to change people's lives for safer communities. We have probation teams based in prisons working with our prison colleagues to prepare people for reintegration back into the community. Clare, you're the manager of one of those teams, and I'd like to begin by asking you a bit about your role within the prison environment and what it's like working within probation's prison team. What does your day look like?
My day can be very varied. No 2 days are the same. It involves providing support to my two colleagues within Hydebank and the two probation officers that work alongside me. So my day might look like meeting with them to discuss the cases they have and looking at some of the challenges they may be facing. We do a lot of work in Hydebank around preparing people for release into community who will be serving licences when they go out into the community. So our work is about supporting people to reintegrate back into the community. So really we're trying to coordinate that discharge, I suppose, that transition for people moving into the community. So it may also then involve me looking in with other partners, the likes of the ACRO and housing rights, in terms of looking at accommodation issues or employment issues, as well as maybe attending meetings within the prison. So I would attend the governor's meeting within Hydebank to sit alongside our NIPS colleagues and work very closely with them in the coordination of people's discharge from prison. It can be very busy, quite challenging at times. You never know maybe what you're going to be facing, but it's very interesting work and something that I really enjoy. On occasion I also support the probation officers with seeing people, so I maybe have meetings with service users as well, or the students as they're known as in Hydebank College, in terms of taking time to listen to them about their fears and anxieties perhaps about being released and what support we can offer around that in terms of supporting them with that, making links with their families to kind of assess what they may need in terms of accommodation or what support they may need once they leave custody.
So your team covers Hydebank College and the women's prison. What does that entail and what does partnership working look like on a daily basis?
Partnership working can look like sitting and having a cup of coffee with somebody and just kind of chatting over what somebody's case might be, or it can be a more formal meeting. So we kind of do a lot of, I suppose there's different layers to the partnership working within the prison setting. It can be through the governor's meetings. We can have case conferences, which would be a multidisciplinary forum for looking at people's discharge plan and preparation for release. So it can take a variety of forms, I suppose, in the prison, and everybody is coming from different perspectives. So part of, I suppose, my role is being able to weigh up those perspectives about bringing our values, our probation values of respect and diversity, and being able to weigh up those values in order to plan, I suppose, and support people as they move in transition. It's also about how we help people, I suppose, to grow or have capacity to change. I suppose that's a key part of our work. So it's about how we draw the perspectives of perhaps housing rights, NACRO, the NIPS officers, healthcare, how we kind of bring all those kind of very perspectives together in one package for somebody to support them when they leave prison and when they leave custody. As you say, we work with young offenders and we also work with women, and there can be complexities within that, as many of the young people and the female population have childhood trauma. So there's a lot of work that needs to be undertaken there in terms of maybe addressing some of that trauma as well, and making sure we perhaps link in with Start 360, who would work with people who have maybe experienced an addiction as part of their pathway to offending. So I suppose there's a whole host of really complex, I suppose, those interconnected personal and environmental things that really contribute to working when you're working with somebody. I suppose the Justice Minister had talked about earlier on in the week about your social, emotional kind of parts to when it comes to somebody, and that's what we're really trying to do, is holistically, I suppose, look at how we support somebody upon release, that whole holistic perspective. And we do that by trying to work together with those competing perspectives, which sometimes, of course, can be challenging.
You're also in partnership, I suppose, with the probation teams out in the community, and there would be an element then of a handover of the service user who's leaving custody going out into the community. What does that look like?
3 months prior to release, we would make links with our community probation officers and they would be allocated in the community. So it depends what kind of sentence you're coming out on. If you're coming out on a determinate custodial sentence, then it's about arranging that first appointment. Depending on where you'll be going to live, depends where you'll be allocated on the community. And that can be challenging because sometimes people have become homeless as a result of their offending. So sometimes it can be right to the wire for people in terms of where they're being allocated to in the community, because we're not sure what housing provision is going to be available for that person, which can be a real challenge, not just for us as a service provider or those supporting, but for the service users themselves and indeed their families. It can also create anxiety for victims, of course, too, in terms of that as well. So that can be quite complex and challenging at times in relation to that. But part of that then is about having that tripartite meeting with the community probation officer, the probation officer in the prison and the service user or student, in terms of looking at what work has been undertaken in custody, in terms of the change and what work may be outstanding, in terms of what needs to be developed further when they go out on licence. So that may be looking at a plan for linking them in with addiction services in the community and what their accommodation needs to look like, whether there's opportunities for positive engagement with constructive use of time through some of our community and voluntary partners, through employment. So you're really trying to look at, as I said, that really holistic aspect of what needs to happen in somebody's life to achieve change going forward.
You've pursued a career that is complex, also challenging, and can be tough at times. So what made you want to be a probation officer?
Probation officers in Northern Ireland are qualified social workers. So I've been working as a social worker for over 20 years. So I'm interested in supporting people to change. I have faith and a belief that people have the capacity to change. And certainly I think that's, given that it's Prisons Week and it's all about, I suppose, having that faith of those prayers that the Christian community bring. I suppose I would feel that for me personally, I do have a faith that people and a belief that people can change, and there's hope. I would see hope in people. So I kind of think it's back into that value base of the kind of respect, the diversity, being able to be compassionate for people as well. So I suppose naturally that was the career I was drawn to, which has then led me to work for probation for the past 16, 17 years. Things can happen in people's lives. So trauma, everybody has their own pathway into offending, and it can be lots of different things can contribute to that, but there's also a pathway out of that. And I suppose with the right support and wanting to bring about that change in yourself and having the right support, that you have the capacity to change and people have the capacity to change. So I suppose that would be my core beliefs around that, which I suppose probation is quite, the foremost of our work is about changing lives for safer communities, but you have to believe people can change.
So how does working within a prison environment compare to the other areas of probation that you've worked in?
I've worked in a number of different teams. I think those combined experiences have really helped me prepare for working in the prison environment and the people that we're working with that are coming out of custody. I wouldn't say it's more challenging, but presents a different challenge in that some of the areas that maybe, for example, those different perspectives I've talked about before in the community, within the custody centre, it's more amplified, I think, sometimes at times, because you're in a closed environment. So I kind of think that can amplify sometimes in perhaps not cause tension, but it can lead to working closely, which requires, I suppose, resilience and patience in terms of working with difference and working with different perspectives. And I also think within the prison, you're trying to help people transition. And maybe people have been in prison a long time, they may be institutionalised, and maybe family support has moved on or life has moved on and they're coming out in quite an isolated environment, or if they want to move, they're at a place where they want to move on their networks, they don't want to go back to those old networks that could lead them back along a path of re-offending. So I suppose for me in that situation, it can be challenging but also rewarding in that you're doing not a short piece of work with people, but I suppose you're doing a part of that. You're starting them off on that journey coming out into the community, whereas in the community you're kind of supporting them till the end of their licence or their order. Really within the prison setting, you're kind of starting them off on that journey, and I suppose that's positive to see, but that can be challenging too, because the first kind of 6 months coming out can be very challenging for people. So it's having that good stability as a start, so being able to be linked in with networks, having stability in your housing, for example, can be crucial to all of that. And there's a lot of those factors that aren't within our gift. So as we work very hard with our partners to try to create stability for people who come out through the prison gates, that can be very difficult at times, and you can be faced with many challenges.
So as an organisation, that ties in quite well that, we're trying to move towards implementing a trauma-informed approach to how we look after our staff, but also how we deal with the people we supervise and with victims of crime. And how important do you think that is?
I think it's vital that we understand that for victims there is trauma in experiencing, there's hurt caused and harm caused by people who commit offences, and I think that's important that we recognise that, and I think it's important for the people who perpetrate that harm to recognise that also. In probation we have the victims unit, and when we're working with to support our service users, we would have a very strong victim focus kind of around that. But likewise then, a lot of the people who perpetrate the harm have experienced harm themselves, and I suppose in terms of supporting them to heal that harm can then work some way towards them reducing their likelihood of being harmful to other people and to cause harm in the longer term. So it's that fine balance between, I suppose there's a very fine balance there in relation to that, but certainly there's plenty of research that would indicate, particularly childhood trauma leads to those health harming behaviours such as addiction. So people can often mask the trauma through addiction. Addiction can increase somebody's likelihood of becoming involved in offending behaviour, and it's that cycle, I suppose, of how that trauma, that unresolved trauma then leads to the addiction, leads to the offending, and it's very circular. It can be very circular in terms of that. So I suppose it's about how we help people break that cycle in terms of helping people to change. And we have to understand change is a process as well. So people may not always be ready to address their trauma. So what can we do in terms of mitigating against those risks or supporting them to manage their risk of harm with some of the external measures through the licenses that we might have against that support. That current control balance, I suppose, is really important. That we are compassionate to people, that we support them. So you're always trying to balance that with the people we're working with in terms of understanding their trauma and their journey against perhaps the trauma harm they could cause other people.
And so can you tell me a little bit then about the support mechanisms that might be in place for you as a practitioner and your colleagues, and how you support each other?
I suppose there's a range of support mechanisms. There's the formal of Inspire in terms of what the organisation offers, what probation would offer in terms of the kind of counselling to take that up on a regular basis. In terms of myself and my colleagues, we go for lunch. We go to the garden centre last week for a cup of coffee. Or it's about sometimes just taking time out to say, this is difficult work and that's okay. To not be afraid to ask for help or support. To not be afraid to have moments of humour. To kind of just acknowledge that actually it is challenging, what we're doing is challenging work, but it's also challenging for the people we're working with as well. So I suppose we kind of can absorb that. So outside probation officers, we probably absorb quite a lot, and therefore you do need to find healthy ways of dealing that, either formally or informally. But I think it's about taking time to listen to each other and about understanding what might affect me mightn't affect my colleague, because it's okay to be angry and it's okay to be upset. It's what you do with those emotions that can be problematic, so how you handle those emotions in a healthy way.
If you were talking to someone who was considering a career in probation, what would you say to them?
I think the message I would have for the public about probation is that we can only create safer communities by supporting people to change. And supporting people to change doesn't sit comfortably because you have to engage with the person who's maybe caused a lot of harm to somebody. And that can be a very difficult and uncomfortable fit for people, and I understand that. I don't underestimate that. But actually to create safer communities, we have to believe in people's capacity to change and have that faith in that capacity to change. And therefore, it's about giving people maybe a chance or an opportunity to do that. And they will be in different phases of their journey. So I think it's about how do we give people chances, but not acknowledge the fact that they maybe have caused harm as well. So again, balancing that. So my kind of message would be is that we still have to have hope in humanity, I suppose, that actually, things can happen, and yes, harmful things can happen, but people can move on. I think it's important. How do we create safe spaces to create opportunity to change?
And the alternative to not working with people who've offended would be to just allow the same cycle to continue.
And I think I had read something about being in custody, obviously the loss of liberty is the punishment. So I think people can sometimes think, well, people should be punished. If you don't allow for growth and development, then you're not going to change your attitudes or your beliefs. And that you can apply that to anybody. I think you don't need to just attend that to people who commit offending behaviour involved in it. You can apply that to yourself as an individual.
And would you still recommend probation as a career?
I would definitely recommend probation as a career. I know we have some students come aboard, and we have had students last year as my team who have now come on to be staff members here within the organisation. In fact, there's a number of students over the years that now work within the organisation who maybe have placements here. I think it's a valuable career. I think we can make a difference. We might not always see that in the moment, but I think that's something that when you reflect over time, it's not without its challenges, but I think it can be a very rewarding career.
Thank you very much, Clare, for giving us an insight into your work and your role as a probation area manager. Find out more about probation and how it changes people's lives for safer communities by visiting our website at pbni.org.uk or by following us on our social media platforms: X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube.